Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, we're going to talk about what married men and single women have in common. But before we do that, I must, of course, tell you to subscribe. The most recent one was about depression and when people can't admit or don't recognize that they are depressed. And this can manifest in myriad ways, including irritability, anger, fatigue, body pain, like just a whole bunch of things that people don't usually associate with depression, apathy, just a meaninglessness, like a feeling of just that your life isn't meaningful. There's all sorts of ways, and if you know some more of them, then you may be able to acknowledge and recognize when you're depressed and thereby work on it, which was not only good for you, but for your family. So, what do married men and single women have in common? They both have a high libido. They both have a high libido, and they both underestimate the power of monogamy in reducing female libido. This is also unhappily married women, by the way. So we're talking about a commonality between married men and single women and unhappily married women. What do you think that might lead to when you get those types of people together? Married men, unmarried women. Affairs. So men frequently have affairs with women who have the same libido level as them. Why, though? Why do these women have the same libido level as them? Because, A, they're a new person, so you always have a new hike in your libido with a new person. But also, these people are not in monogamous relationships that were good, that then they lost their sex drive. So people like to make sense of the world, right? So this is a human thing. You like to think that you have hacked some sort of a system. You understand things such that you can prevent bad things happening to you. This is the human drive to feel safe and secure. This is why when you hear about a horrible thing happening, like let's say a car crash where a child dies, right? If you hear about that, many people will immediately start thinking about why it couldn't have happened to them. They will scour the article for any detail that indicates something they could tell themselves as a reason for why this wouldn't happen to them, because the idea of random bad things happening in the universe makes them so anxious, and anxious people do this more than other people. So they become so overpoweringly anxious that they have to find a reason that this, quote, would not happen to them. So they'll be like, let me see. 11:52. She was driving at 11:52. I would not drive that late. Why? I never drive that late anymore. I would not drive a child that late. So terrible thing that happened, but she was driving real late. It's like, come on, Like, if you look at it for a second, you could be like, oh my God, you're just trying to find some reason that this couldn't happen to you because the thing makes you so anxious. But it's like kind of an adaptive mechanism to get people through life where bad things randomly happen. Kids do this all the time, by the way. Dysfunctional families have children that say things to themselves like, now, if I'm just good, mom isn't going to yell. If I'm just quiet, dad isn't going to beat me. It's been disproven time and time again. You can't be quiet enough for dad not to beat you. But if you tell yourself instead as a child, dad is a fucking crazy lunatic that will just beat my ass randomly, that's no way to live. Like, you cannot maintain an adaptive childhood. You cannot feel any sanity in that universe. So you have to tell yourself that you just haven't been good enough yet to not get beat. And that, ironically, is better for kids to have that delusion than to just say, my life is totally random. He's just going to beat me whenever he drinks. I never know when he's going to drink. So I never know. That would be literally crazy making. So instead, the child has to say, there's some sort of pattern here. I just haven't figured it out yet. So, of course, you could see how that happens when the children grow up. Then they continue to think that there are these kinds of patterns and they could be good enough that their spouse or whoever will be nice to them. But they pick a spouse like their parent, and so this never happens, and they replicate their upbringing. But so it doesn't end up going any better until they can get into therapy or do some deep introspection and recognize that they are replicating these patterns. But in childhood, it's very adaptive to think, there's some way to fix this, I just haven't figured it out yet. So that's what adults do too. So how is this related to our topic? Even though it was, of course, an interesting diversion, as I usually have. Women in unhappy marriages who also have low sex drives tell themselves that there is a fantasy world where if they were happily married, then they would have a sex drive. Well, this is a nice fantasy to have, and of course there's a normal distribution of sex drives. But I have never yet, and of course women who are single think that they will be the ones that do find somebody to whom they are so physically and chemically attracted that they have a honeymoon stage forever. It's always a honeymoon stage, sexual connection, and they will do this by, unlike the women that they know, they're going to choose better. And then they come up with these kind of superstitious things like, those women just didn't marry men they were really attracted to, and that's why their sex drives go down when I hear about women's sex drives going down. Or the unhappily married women say, it's because those women are in unhappy marriages like me. So we all have low sex drives in this category of woman, the unhappily married women. We have low sex drives because our husbands just are the problem, and they're such assholes, or they're so useless, or they're struggling with substance abuse or PTSD or depression or really whatever the case may be, and that's why. So why do I try to dispel this illusion that's so, nice for women to have? Two reasons. One, they're going to end up real unhappy when they realize that there is no evading fate, and and basically it's not fate, it's habituation, it's basic behavior theory. Everybody gets used to who they're with. And for the lower sex drive gender, women have less testosterone, and they're more responsive to the effects of age and to monogamy and menopause, etc. There's really no going around it. Your sex drive's always going to go down. If it starts off super high, you got a better shot. But it's not like anybody perpetuates this honeymoon stage forever. It doesn't matter how attracted you are at the beginning. So a lot of women that are like, those women that are like don't have sex in their marriages now, they just weren't attracted to the man. I rarely, maybe 10% of the women that I work with were never attracted to their husband. Most of them were super attracted to their husband, and that's the common situation for most of us divorced people. Attraction was not the problem. There was other problems, but it was never this. Chemistry was fine. It's the relationship didn't work for different reasons than that. So this is also an extremely important podcast for men to listen to who are tempted to have affairs or who may be in an affair and contemplating leaving for the affair partner. This only works out 5% of the time that people who leave for their affair partners marry their affair partners. That's 5%. And then within that, 75% of those marriages don't last until 5 years. Why don't they last? Well, numerous reasons. The biggest one that I would imagine, which I see frequently, is that if somebody cheated with you, sometime a little bit later after the honeymoon stage occurs, you start to realize that they might cheat on you with someone else. And then there's a lot of trust issues and so forth. Also, a lot of women who will sleep with married men definitionally have low self-esteem, because they are willing to be the second fiddle and to be with a man who is not committed to them publicly, unless they too are in this situation where they're just cheating and they just think of it as sex, and in that case these people don't marry each other. But in the case where a woman feels very romantically about a married man and has taken a lot of shit and not spent holidays with him and been second fiddle all these years, what kind of woman is that? That's a woman with low self-esteem, truly. And so when she gets into the marriage with him, she's still going to have the same low self-esteem and probably depression issues. Then the honeymoon stage is going to wear off. And then she's, a woman who is angrier with him than his first wife was. And that's not going to go well. But the thing is, people have very high expectations when so there's a single woman and her, sex drive is through the roof. The married guy's like, finally, I found somebody that can match me for libido. I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. So I'm going to be with this kind of woman instead of my wife, who was never very sexual at the beginning. Well, guess what? Her sex drive's going to go down too. And she's also older, because you're older, so everybody's older, except for Leonardo DiCaprio. He only dates the same age woman. But everybody else, usually a guy who's 40, He's going to maybe go down to 30-year-old woman, but not down to 20. But either way, when even if he dates a 20-year-old woman, she's going to probably want kids by 25. And at that point is when your sex drive goes down. Breastfeeding, your sex drive goes down. Body doesn't want to make a baby. But anyway, another thing to think about when we're talking about this is limerence. Now, what is limerence? There's a good book, Love and Limerence by Dorothy Tenov, written many decades ago. It's still an interesting read. And limerence is basically the infatuation or honeymoon stage. And here she writes that it lasts 1.5 to 3 years, which is, what everybody else has found too. Or there's some people where limerence stays for like 20 years, in which cases when it's unrequited love. So there's the uncertainty of the relationship is what keeps the person in a limerence stage. When the uncertainty is resolved, then there's no more limerence, aka honeymoon stage. So when you're with your affair partner, you could be with them for like 10 years and be like, wow, I know them inside and out. I know what their sex drive is. Man, you don't know shit because her limerence stage has not resolved. As soon as you're married, that's when you know who she really is, because then the uncertainty fades away. This is why people have hysterical bonding after a partner is found out to be unfaithful, as I discussed in my infidelity podcast, because so hysterical bonding means this rapid, intense uptick in the sex life between the partners when one of them is found out to be cheating. This happens frequently because all of a sudden there's uncertainty. It's like, oh my God, are we even going to stay together? Does he even love me? Does she even love me? And that leads to like this little version of limerence where you're obsessed with each other. Obsession is only there with uncertainty. When you're married with kids, there's no uncertainty. Plus, there's a biological change when there is any kind of life event for women, such as aging, children, breastfeeding, menopause, perimenopause, depression, anxiety, any of it. So is this to say that every woman has the same sex drive and will have the same decrease? No, of course not. Again, normal distribution, like with everything. However, married men and single women and unhappily married women are all under the delusion that somehow there are couples that can remain in the honeymoon stage forever. The only people, and I never say that one gender is better or smarter than the other. That's some reason that I get so many couples counseling referrals, because y'all know I don't do that, but I'm going to go off brand for a second. The only people that really understand the reality of what's going on here are the happily married women. That's the only subset. The happily married women are like, yeah, of course, I love my husband. And of course, my sex drive isn't where it used to be. Doesn't have to do with him. He's great, but I'm not 25. And this isn't a new relationship. And I love him deeply. And I still don't look at him and want to rip his clothes off. Because this is my husband and I got shit to do. For example, I got these multiple children to take care of and my job and the mortgage. And I'm also, by the way, 40, going through perimenopause symptoms and got to talk to my doctor. These are the people who understand more of what reality is. The unhappily married women say, okay, my sex drive may be down, but that's because of him and this marriage. Not realizing, because they have no control group, you don't live two lives at once like an experiment. So they don't know that even if they were happily married, they still wouldn't want to rip the guy's clothes off every 3 seconds like they would in the dating stage. And the single women, because when you're single, that's basically when a woman's sex drive is equal to a man's, at least as much as it can be. That's when you think about sex all the time. So there are women who have been divorced for so many years that they basically turn into single women, again, and they're dating a lot, and they have a really high sex drive, and they assume then that in the next marriage, they're going to not make the same mistake that so many women around them make, which is marrying the, quote, wrong person that does not keep your high libido high. There's no man. You could be in the most loving relationship, and the women in them also have their sex drive go down. The difference is they will understand, oh, okay, I love him. Let me get myself in the mood for sex. Let me at least start kissing him, something, and then we can start to have sex that I find definitely enjoyable. And you can refer back to my podcast on high libido women. Do they have spontaneous or responsive desire? And I talk about how they have responsive as well in the majority of cases. It was funny because when I posted that one, I got somebody commenting and she's like, I've been with my boyfriend for like a few years and like I still want to have sex with him all the time. So like it must not be, and it's like that's literally what this podcast is for the people that think that there's something about being like a young woman with a boyfriend that in any way replicates what it's going to be like to be a married mom. I'll tell you, I've been there. It doesn't, there is much less continuity than you would like to believe. And it's hard to even imagine it. If you're a very high sex drive young woman in an unmarried state prior to kids, it's hard to imagine what it will be like the first time that you don't experience a sex drive. So for me, that was when I breastfed. I was 28 years old before this happened. Before that, I was as stupid as all the other women that are like, oh no, those people, they just married the wrong partner, probably wasn't attracted to them, from the beginning. And so, or maybe they're just low libido people, when I would hear about, jokes and so forth about sex going down over marriage. And I was like, oh no, if you're high sex drive, and you married somebody that you're attracted to, then your sex drive is going to be that way forever. You just got to keep on making sure that you have the time to spend together, like all this stupid shit. Who thinks this stuff? And I say stupid with love. I was stupid. It's a term of endearment. It just means innocent, naive, right? So men think this. Men are the ones who are like, oh no, I just got to work out more. They're just going to be into me again like she used to be. Unless your workout involves you literally like doing some sci-fi action where you crawl into a different body and become a different man, it ain't going to do anything. It doesn't do anything. Mostly what happens is she's like, oh fuck, he's going to the gym. I guess I got to say he looks good. Okay, you look so good, honey. Oh, tonight we have to have sex. That's what it's like when your wife of 20 years sees her husband of 20 years go to the gym. Okay, good. That's nice. He looks cute. All right, good. But it's not anything like how she used to feel about you when she wanted to fuck your brains out at the beginning because of habituation. The same thing, the same human phenomenon and mammalian phenomenon that makes exposure therapy work. The same reason that you could cure a dog phobia by just hanging out with a dog is why you can cure the honeymoon stage by just hanging out more with your husband. I mean, that's just what happens. People get used to shit. And so, for me, since I'm sure you're on tenterhooks, waiting to hear about my personal epiphany. The first time was when I was breastfeeding, when I had my first baby, and I was breastfeeding when I was 28 years old. And I was like, oh my God, I don't feel anything. I don't want to have sex at all. And it was shocking. It was like having a limb removed, it's like phantom limb syndrome. It was like, I'm a person who wants to have sex. What happened? Why don't I want to have sex at all? And I was like, oh my God, this is what the women I work with who are postmenopausal must feel like. And I remember telling that to my then husband. This is it. This is what it is to have low sex drive. And it was so astonishing for me because I had always, categorized myself as so high sex drive, etc. I didn't realize what I really was a young, healthy woman. I was very sexually open. So I did have a high sex drive. But I hadn't come up against any biological things that would have, decreased the sex drive yet. And by the time I had my first child if I got married at 26. I had been with my husband from 24, then 26, then 28. So by that time, it was about 4 years. So it was time for the limerence phase to wear off anyway, and the breastfeeding just shoved the last knife in it. And I'm not saying that I, with my ex-husband, did not have sex again or anything like that. Certainly we did. I had 2 other children, and the sex life was never an issue, but it was a profound decrease from how I had felt about myself previously, which is that this was just a way I was wired and I was just always going to be high sex drive. So that's why I'm so sure that nobody's doing a bait and switch with their husbands, because I was there and the women I talked to were there. And it's like if you remain with somebody that you're attracted to and you still have no sex drive, it's more shocking to you, honestly, than it is to the guy. And the guy takes it so personally, but the woman knows it's not personal. especially if she's done any sort of introspection or if she's happily married, and then she's like, oh my God, yeah, I mean, he hasn't really done anything. He's fine, and I just don't want to have sex anymore. So it's the more happily married women, which at that stage, I was at that point, and who are like, oh my God, this shit just changes. It just changes. So for any married men who are listening who feel that you've found this kindred spirit in some sort of single woman right now or divorced woman that you're attracted to, and you feel that you have found your soulmate sexually, remember, she's just a human. She's just a mammal. And she feels it now. She's so in love with you that she's never going to change in any way. But she does. And even the women who are high sex drive do. And even the women that are the sexual pursuers that I talk to still don't want it all the time because they're women. So whereas men who are high sex drive sexual pursuers, you could push them into a closet in the middle of your kid's birthday party and give them a blowjob. And as long as, like it's only 5 minutes, they'll do it. A woman? Never. Never, 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 unless she's a diagnosed sex addict, in which case you're going to be dealing with a lot of comorbid personality disorder symptoms that you don't want to get involved with. But anyway, hope you found this instructive and illuminating as usual, and I will talk to y'all soon.